Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up today is I'm biased, and to be fair, I probably say this every week, but a very exciting part of the book. We're diving into the 12th step. And I mean, that's what we're after. That 12th step experience. Like that's the goal. Now, to be fair, when I got here, that didn't seem like the goal, and the goal was really for me to try to avoid the steps at all cost. But that's what I'm after is this experience. And so, chapter 7, page 89, working with others. Now, one of the things that Terry talks about quite a lot, and I love, is that to emphasize it is working with others, not working on others. Because I think I'm working on them. I think I'm trying to fix, manage, save, cure, control, dictate, all of the different things. And like, listen, I have that joke that for somebody like me, no capes. If you guys remember The Incredibles, Edna Mode, no capes, because I want to put on my cape, like Mighty Mouse, like I am here to save the day. That's what I want to do. But it is not working on them; it is working with them. So working with others. Also, a whole chapter that kicks us into step 12, and the title of that chapter is working with others. I have a feeling, I have a feeling working with others is an important part of the program. Just going to throw that out there. And I say that because that's been something we've been emphasizing from the earliest pages of this book. That if I want permanent contented sobriety, I've got to carry this message to others. And just an interesting thing, I know nobody here would ever struggle with pedantry, being pedantic. I'm sure none of you fall into that. But somebody might be like, wait a minute, Paige. The word sponsorship is not found in the first 164 pages of this book, to which I will fully and wholeheartedly agree. But the job description is all over it. And so the chapter Working with Others is going to tell us how we can carry this message to others, how we sponsor others, even if we don't really use that language specifically. So, working with others also, it kicks off with some promises, which is a powerful way to kick off a chapter. So, this is what is promised to us. So, it says, practical, and welcome those that just joined, page 89, chapter 7, Working with Others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So, first, let's break that down. Practical experience. What that means is this is not an intellectual sitting in like an ivory tower and saying, yes, I believe best practices for those little drunks are to do this. No. And it's not a theory. It's not an opinion. It's not a belief. It's not even a wish. It is our lived practical experience. Each and every one of us who has recovered from whatever illness brings you to this all inclusive study, our lived experience is this. And I think that's important because I don't know about you. I don't like being talked down to. I don't, and I have a hard time taking direction from somebody who's got no experience. You know what I'm saying? When you go to somebody who looks like they've always had their life together and they're like, here's what you got to do. And it's like, what do you know about not ending up with wet pants smoking crack behind a dumpster? What do you know about that? I need to hear from the people that are like, girl, I was there, pinkies up like a lady. Here's how I got out of it. And there's something about I've been where you've been, I've done what you've done, and this is the result that I've got. And so this whole thing, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, what Drug Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, it is a fellowship of experience. It is not based on what I think, what I feel, what I know, what I believe, but what I experience. So our experiences that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking. I need immunity from drinking. To be immune from means to be safe and protected and apart from, like safely away. And if I have an understanding of the first step, I see the desperate need for that immunity. You see, the first step is a promise. It's a promise that I will relapse. I have to stay sober. I need to stay sober. I want to stay sober, but I will relapse. And when I see the inevitability of my relapse, I see the necessity for immunity because I don't got it. And I need it with everything that is in me. And here is where it is promised. I can experience immunity from that relapse. And how do I get it? Intensive work with other alcoholics. Intensive. I'm going to make us, or ask us gently, I'm not going to make anyone do anything. It'll be a gentle suggestion to underline, highlight that word intensive. If you know me, I talk quite a lot about that idea of, man, if I'm not at least a little bit inconvenienced, I got to get another sponsee, or I got to work more intensively with the one that I've got. You know what I mean? I've got to be intensively working with others. And sometimes people will be like, girl, you're a little intense. I'm like, I was told to do this intensively. I'm just following directions. But that's the idea, that this isn't a casual once in a while when I feel like it. Because if I do it when I feel like it, I'm just going to burst a bubble. I'm never going to feel like it. We were talking about how we're having that season change. So for us in North America, or in the Northern Hemisphere, we're coming into autumn. It's November. It's like soup season. I just want to be cozy. It's like midnight out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, it's just, I don't want to have to go work with somebody. And then like for somebody like Kevin on the Southern Hemisphere where it's hot, I don't want to have to work with other people. Gosh, we're hitting 30 degrees Celsius. It's never a good time to work with others. And so it's important for me to be at least a little bit inconvenienced. I'm not saying we can't. In fact, we're going to see why it's so important to give to our families. Give to your family. Have hobbies. Have friends. Have passions. Work. Do the things you want to do. But I need my spare time to be at least a little bit inconvenienced. Because I don't know what's good for me. And I will leave it until my life is burning before I'm like, okay, fine. I'll take somebody through the doctor's opinion. All right. You know. And I'm sure nobody else relates. That's just how I'll do it if I'm left to my own devices. Little bumper cars, you know. So it says, it works when other activities fail. And so what is the works? And what does this carry this message and this working with other alcoholics, or in our case, whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study? What we're talking about specifically is 12-step work. Yes, go be of service to your fellowship. Yes, get a home group. Yes, get involved. But what we are specifically talking about right now is 12-step work. That carrying that message one-on-one to another person who has suffered the way that I've suffered, taking them through these steps. So that's what we're talking about. And that works when other activities fail. So when nothing else is working, when you're not getting relief anywhere else, go help someone else. Go carry this message to somebody. Go try to take somebody through the doctor's opinion. Go talk to somebody. Try to see if you can help somebody with their inventory. Go get out of self. And that's what Bill Wilson was telling us in his story. He spoke about, man, when he was plagued with waves of self-pity and resentment that nearly drove him back to drink, it was work with another alcoholic would save the day. It was carrying this message to another person who has suffered the way that we have suffered. That is what helped. And after, he would feel amazingly lifted up and set on his feet. So this works when nothing else works. And this is also how we know that this thing is experiential and not based on theory or opinion. Because I guarantee when we've all had one of those days, and it's like, what do I want to do? I want to have an emotional cocoon and wrap myself up in a blankie. And I could probably use a little binky too while I'm at it. I'm not emotionally immature. I just need to be swaddled. It's fine. Actually, Lynn, this is when I should put the picture of me being wrapped up in cotton and put on the pedestal. That's the place for it. Like I just want a swaddling, right? But it's saying, no, that doesn't work. Now, to be fair, I've not been swaddled, like as an adult. But what I'll say is when I've had those emotional cocoons, it hasn't gotten me out of self. What has worked is going and help somebody else and carrying this message. And we'll talk about that. So it says it works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. So it is a suggestion, and we have 12 of those, the steps. But I will point out we don't really have a good alternative suggestion, because I will be completely transparent. When I came to the rooms at 12 step and I saw the steps on the wall and they were like, they're only suggested, it's like, great, I will take your option B. What is your super value menu? What is, you know what I mean? Like, give me your gluten-free options. I'm not here. And just so you know, all 12 steps are gluten-free. So we're here for you. If you got celiac, you're all good. But like, I don't want to do it. And like, it is a suggestion, but we don't have an alternative. On bottom of page 25, it talks about, we go on to the better end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, or accept spiritual help. And that's the black and white predicament that someone of my type falls into. That if I don't have a spiritual awakening, that I grow and that I deepen, that happens as the result of the 12 steps, I'm going to continue to live the way that I am living. And the way that I was living was relapse after relapse. And the time in between was pain and misery and suffering because I couldn't stand the way that I felt. So it is a suggestion. Nobody's going to make you do it, but we don't have an alternative. So it says, carry this message to other alcoholics. This message. What is the message? Well, the message is what is laid out in this book and our lived experience with it. We share our experience with the illness, however it manifests. The illness as it pertains to our allergy, that once I start, I cannot stop. Our illness as it pertains to the obsession of the mind, that when I am sober, I go back to it again and again and again. And then I share my experience with the solution, which is the spiritual awakening. And my practical lived experience with how I got from that problem to that solution, which is all 12 steps. And I share my experience with that. And that's this message, as it's outlined in this book, my experience with it. So that's what I'm trying to do. And it says, you can help when no one else can. And by the way, welcome. We're on page 89, first full paragraph. We're not going quickly. But that idea, you can help when no one else can. You guys, I don't know if you realize what that means. The best doctors, the best psychiatrists, the best psychologists, some of the best of the best of the best of the world, they cannot help certain people like us. And their lives have been entrusted to this little crackhead. You know what I mean? Well, ultimately to God, not to me. But like, I get to help. And I get to reach people that no one else is able to reach. Also, bless you. I caught that sneeze. It's the worst when I do it. But we get to help. And that's what's the most incredible thing. And this is where that spiritual alchemy comes in. Often I'll work with people when we go through resentments. What pops up on our resentments is maybe our alcoholism or our addiction or the problem that has brought us to the rooms at 12 step, and we put that in column 1. And it's that idea of like, I'm a grateful alcoholic or I'm a grateful addict. How could that possibly be? Who could identify in that way? That seems illogical with the horrific reality that is this illness. But you see what happens when I take this course of action, the worst things about who I am, the worst things about the harms that I've caused, they get absolutely radically transformed. And I see that when I sit down with another human being, who has suffered the way that I've suffered, who has gone through what I've gone through, man, I am able to help them in a way that is incredible. And I see that everything that I went through, everything that I did to others, everything that I experienced, none of it gets wasted. And all of it gets used to help another human being. And that can't happen until I'm sponsoring others. I can't really feel that until I'm carrying this message again, that this thing is experiential. So it says you can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. What a privilege it is to be able to build the trust in people from our own experience. And if you guys know what that's like when you've been in the rooms and you're like, oh, that person shared my story. Or maybe you're sitting down with your sponsor and you're sharing an experience and your sponsor is like, hey, me too. And they share a story that's so similar. And it feels like y'all are reading my diary, like what are you stalkers? What are you doing, right? But that's that thing that we get to build that trust in. Like I know, and I've been there, and here's how I got freedom. How powerful is that? And it's so you can secure their confidence when others fail. Now this is important. Remember, they are very ill. When it talks about remember they are very ill, it is one of those things that when I came to the rooms at 12 step, I just thought I was bad. I just thought I was broken, bad and broken beyond repair. I could see that you guys had something, but I just knew that I was so much worse than everyone else and that I was different. I'm sure nobody can relate to that. But you see, what I was experiencing was I was up against an illness over which I could not have possibly any power. And we speak about this a lot, and there is a solution that this is an illness that goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. But it is also a reminder that when we are working with others, so we, as a result of taking this course of action, setting right our wrongs and using our experience to help others, man, that gives us freedom from the shame that pervaded my existence. But also, unrecovered people are sometimes poorly behaved. I know, this is shocking. This is shocking information that somebody who's just coming off, like decades-long alcohol abuse or, has spent a better portion of their formative years, snorting cocaine and smoking meth, that they might not always be emotionally the most well-balanced and have things like courtesy and manners, I know this is for those that have, brand new information here, Paige. I know, and selfish, self-centered. Bless you again. Like that's that. Like what? But when we're dealing with people, it's important to remember that they are ill. They are ill. And I talk about this for a number of reasons. One, it's important to have patience, but also, to be honest, to set boundaries about, to set down clear expectations of what the relationship's going to look like. But it's also important, at least for me, to approach with compassion and curiosity. To like, where are they coming from? Why might they be talking this way or thinking this way, and seeing how best to approach. Now, that's not a page idea. We're going to talk about that a lot in the coming pages about seeking to understand. But it is also important to understand the nature of the illness. So the nature of the illness that they have is the same as the nature of the illness that I have. So using our patience to help with the selfishness and self-centeredness, but deeper than that, knowing that if they have the illness that is outlined in this book, it is a matter of time before they relapse. And we are up against the clock. It is important, at least I have found for me, to keep that in mind when working with others. Am I working with them in such a pace where that, like, we're making enough progress before the window of willingness closes? Or am I expecting somebody to, stay sober a long period of time so that we can work the steps, because that might not be possible. They might not have the ability. And we'll talk about, again, this in a couple pages, about how it's important to see what their cycle looks like. What is the period of time that we have to work with, before they go out again? Because we can get some clues on when that's going to happen based on how they've been relapsing and how they've been going through that cycle. So remember, they are very ill. And for me, I take the role of sponsor, again, the word not found in the first 164 pages, but the job description is all over it. Welcome. We're still on page 89, still on the first paragraph. You think we'd go faster without Terry here? Slower. I know. Yeah, just like a little tortoise. So that illness. So I have that. So the idea is that the word sponsor is not found, but the job description is, and that job is one that I take. It's an avocation. I don't get paid for it, obviously, but it is a responsibility that I take with the utmost seriousness, because I do know that this is a life and death matter, and I do know that, like, if somebody is willing to do the work, man, sometimes that willingness is only open for a little while. So it says, life will take on new meaning. So again, we're in the middle of these promises. And I don't know about you, but my life felt pretty meaningless when I got here. And my life felt pretty meaningless for me when I was kind of doing this stuff or just going to meetings. I would get some of the relief, but I still felt like worthless, and life felt meaningless. New meaning. New meaning. Again, this is not a theory or an idea or a belief. This is our lived experience. And Terry, which he stole from Babe, and I don't know where Babe stole it from, but I would give credit all the way down the line. Terry and I, as we've been going through the Lunacy Commission, we talk about how this is a book of mirrors. I stole it from Terry, and I have full on stole it from Terry. But this is a book of mirrors. I want to hold my experience up to the light of this book. And I want to do that in step one. But just as much, I want to do this with each and every promise that is in this book. Of course, I want to do it with the actions. Am I following the directions? But if I've gone through this work and I'm sponsoring others, is this my experience? Life is taking on new meaning. Hold that experience up to that light. And if not, we're not falling into a pit of shame. It's just telling us, okay, we've got some action to take. We've got to lean in. So it says to watch people recover, to see them help others. Now, I know I'm stopping at like 2 commas, not even at the period, but that idea of to watch people recover and to see them help others. I'm going to say something which, if you've not had this experience, I promise you won't believe me, and you're going to be like, leave meeting, I'm over this, girl. I'll wait till Terry comes back. But I promise this is true. Everything that I was looking for in the bottle, everything that I was looking for in a crack pipe, everything I was looking for, I found in carrying this message and watching them work with others. That is, now, some of y'all know, in certain fellowships, we call that the God dope. Like, that is the God dope. That's what I was after, and I did not know it, and I could not know it until I started doing this thing. Like, that's what I needed. So it says to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish. Now, when we talk about loneliness, some of you are probably sick of me. Thanks for coming, despite being sick of me. I love you. I do a bunch of different talks because I have undiagnosed and clearly unmedicated ADHD. And so I got bored of doing regular experience, strength, and hope. I got bored of that like forever ago. And so I'm like, I'm going to do big book bounce arounds. Again, I have no deficit in my attention. I'm just going to bounce around. And I have this one big book bounce around that I do that focuses on the topic of loneliness and the thread of loneliness as it goes through this book. And you see, the thing about loneliness, we see it first on page 1. You don't have to bounce around with me if you don't want, but we see it on page 1. And we see it first when Bill says, I was very lonely, and again turned to alcohol. And what we see on page 1 when Bill says, I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol, is we see Bill Wilson for the first time using alcohol to treat the spiritual malady. And why I point that out is because loneliness really truly is that spiritual malady. I don't know that until I get a deeper understanding. What I mean by that is, you see, I thought loneliness was a sense of separateness from other people. But I don't know about you guys. I've felt lonely in a stadium full of people. And I don't know about you. I've felt lonely in a room full of others. Heck, I've felt lonely in a room full of other alcoholics or other addicts. You know what I mean? And I don't know about you. I have felt absolutely, utterly and alone in the middle of a relationship. And I don't know about you, but I have felt absolutely, utterly lonely and alone in the middle of an act of intimacy. And what does that tell me? That tells me that loneliness isn't really about physical proximity to another human being. But what I come to experience is that loneliness is a conscious sense of separateness from God. And what I mean by that is in the fifth step promises, it talks about. So after I've done this fifth step and I've illuminated the dark crannies of the past, withholding nothing, I've begun to have a spiritual experience. That's what it says in the fifth step promises. And one of the lines says, we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. And what has changed between step 1 and step 5? A course of action to begin to clear away the stuff that is between me and this higher power. And now at step 12, here on page 89, when it says to watch loneliness vanish, that is the power. So it's not just that loneliness is gone within me. Why? Because I'm working with others, but that loneliness is gone within me because I am connected. I have that conscious contact, that connectedness with a power that is beyond myself. But more than that, I'm watching that happen in the lives of those around me, and the people that I'm working with, and the people that they're working with, that this thing is happening for them. And it says, to see a fellowship grow up about you. Man, that fellowship, like we are so privileged. See, in 2025, we can zoom in. We don't even have to wear pants unless you don't keep the camera up, in which case, please put on pants. I don't want to have to turn your screen off. That's just polite. But like, it is so easy to find a fellowship. And I really speak to the power that has happened online. You know, it is so easy to find like big book, enthusiastic, like people that are excited about recovery online. I'm not saying everywhere, but you know, when you connect and you're like, oh my gosh, these people are speaking my language. They're excited about this thing. You know, it is so easy in 2025. I don't even have to type in the numbers on the Zoom code if I have a link. All I have to do is click and I can show up and I can find it. And that is a beautiful thing to be a part of that fellowship. But there is something incredible about a fellowship that is created because I was willing to help another alcoholic and they were willing to help another and another. And that sort of fellowship, man, it is powerful to be a small link in the chain of something that happened, you know, between Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob in 1935. That each and every one of us, regardless of our fellowship, is a connection to that link in that chain. A promise that was made from Ebby Thatcher to Bill Wilson. My friend promised when these things were done that I would have this experience. And this promise is given to us and we get to give it to others. Man, that is powerful. And it says to have a host of friends. Now, my former home group would read this at the end of every meeting, and I think it's a beautiful reading to read at the end of every meeting. And when I was in person, my best friend at the time would be there, and my friend would always go, "Host of friends," because my friend loved friends. Host of friends. So whenever I read that, I hear host of friends. But like, yeah. And a lot of times when we come into the recovery, especially new, it's like, man, I don't want to be bored. Or I don't want to, I'm just going to be alone. I need fun in recovery. But a lot of times I put the cart before the horse. And I want to go do the skydiving and scuba diving and the windsurfing, but I've got to clear away the stuff within me first. And then I can find joy whatever I'm doing. And it also might make the windsurfing a little safer, because I'm not gonna relapse on the seas. I clearly don't know anything about any of those activities already. So it says, so to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends, this is an experience you must not miss. So not that would be nice. Not, hey, I'm sure you would like to have that. No, this is an experience, but it's one you must not miss. Like we are saying, have this experience, not have this idea, not have this theory, not have this hope or wish or maybe, but this is an experience. And it is an experience that is available to each and every one of us. Not a theory, an experience. The 12 steps are all experiential. And it says frequent contact with newcomers. Now, I will say, because I'm not a good person, my friend who would go, host of friends, I've been sober longer. So I would put my hand on their, by the way, I will say this was pre-COVID. I would put my hand on their face because I'm like, frequent contact with newcomers. Well, you're the newcomer, contact. And I thought it was funny. They didn't mind. I wouldn't do it if they didn't find humor in it. Like that's I'm big on consent. But the frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Man, if you were to tell me that when the bright spot of my life was like, is it really just going to be hanging out in church basements with the coffee with the creamer that doesn't stir in no matter how hard you try? Is it really going to be that? And it's like, yes and no. Yes and no. Like the bright spot of my life is seeing this power at work in the lives of others. That experience that I must not miss. Like it's so much more than just hanging around. Like, and it really is everything I was looking for in the bottle, everything I was looking for in the pipe. And so the 12th step, it kicks off with some powerful promises. Powerful promises. And I love also, I'll say it says the bright spot of our lives. And I want to hold our experience up to that. Because my life didn't have a whole lot of bright spots by the time I got here. My life was pretty dark. My life was like Canada at 5 p.m. in November. It's pretty dark, I got sober in November. I'm a bleak November baby, But it was dark. There was not a lot of joy, not a lot of happiness, not anything that I could really point to as, oh, love you too. Not a lot of that I could point to for hope. And so this becomes the bright spot of our lives. A life for me that had no bright spots, that had no joy, that had no hope, that had no light. And so now what we're getting into is the directions of, okay, that sounds pretty good. Okay, I would like some of that. Yeah, 13 you and 1 your, absolutely. Oh, that's lovely. It's later in November, but thank you. So yeah, it's kind of direct. It's not as direct as the original manuscript. The original manuscript is like, you gotta do it. But this is like, you get to do this. You get to experience it. Absolutely. So now what we're getting into is, all right, you sold me. All right, that sounds great. I am miserable and unhappy. I'd like to work with others. And so obviously I've got to take the course of action. And now what do I do? So now the directions on how can I find somebody to work with? How do I find somebody to work with? How do I find a sponsee? That's what we're talking about. And I use that language because we know what we're talking about when we mean that. So it says, perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. That's not really the case right now. You see, this book went out to carry the message. You see, there would be way back in the day when this book was published in 1939. I live in Calgary, Alberta. And oh man, I can't remember. We have a little pamphlet. It's called AA and the Stampede City, which is when the book came to Calgary. And I can't remember the numbers and the details. But, in 1939, 1940, I might get a copy of this book, but there's no other sober alcoholic that is anywhere near where I live. And so what do? Well, what I have to do is I have to read this book and follow its directions. And again, it is a reminder how privileged I am to be a silly little drunk in 2025, where there is a fellowship and there are people who have come before and there's Zoom, like there's all these ways to connect. How lucky I am. But the context of this part is that I will have a copy of this book. I'm following its directions. I am experiencing the promises, and I've got to carry this message to others. And so, where am I going to find people to work with? And so, what I will point out is the best place, or one of the best places to find people to work with in 2025 is at a meeting. You'll find them there. Because, we so are. Because if somebody's at a meeting, maybe they're not all the way interested in sobriety. Maybe they're not all the way interested in the steps, but they're interested enough to show up. So that tells us there's a bit of a transition that I make. What is the orientation that I make with meetings? When I first come, of course, it's try to get as much as I can, the information, the understanding. It's like everyone's talking a different language and I don't get any of it. But after a while, I transition into what can I bring to the meeting? Who can I help at the meeting? And that changes. Man, that changes the whole 12-step experience. That changes meetings. When meetings are no longer about what I can get, but instead what I can give, man, it changes it radically. And so one of the best places to find people to work with is at 12-step meetings. Whatever 12-step fellowship is your 12-step fellowship, go there, find them. They are there. And go. And here's the thing. Because I don't do as much in person as I did obviously before Zoom was available. But I will tell you, in the many years, here's what I'll say, is a lot of where I live in the world, if there's a new person, what the chairperson will do is get a little meeting list and people will put their numbers on the back and it'll go around and you give it to the newcomer. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I want to be very clear. I'm not being critical of that. But I will tell you, on average, I will get a call a year on average. Do you know what I mean? Like that, in my experience, is not the most effective way to get in contact with the newcomer. And I mean, let's ask ourselves, was anyone here calling people off the newcomers list? I know I wasn't. And so what can I do? Because if in 2025, I don't have to go to the lengths that we're going to read in this paragraph to find somebody to work with, all I got to do is show up to a meeting and there's other people that maybe even set it up, put on the coffee, unlock the doors. I mean, go get involved, be a part of doing that. But if it's already set up, the least that I can do is go get their number. Go talk to them. Get their number. It doesn't have to be weird. Yes, and absolutely. I'm going to talk about H&I panels and I'm going to talk about public information and how that ties into the direction in this book. Absolutely. But yeah, get their number. And it doesn't have to be this like overwhelming thing. It can be like, hey, are you new? I know this could be a little overwhelming. If you want, I'll give you my number. And if you feel comfortable, I can write down, I can take your number and then I can just reach out, no pressure. I really know it's hard to make that call. Like we can do that. And it will help make that easier. We're called to approach the newcomer. It tells us that the man who's making the approach, I've got to reach out to them. And I'll tell you, and I know nobody here has ever gotten one of these resentments. And actually, some of you might not have because your meetings are a little bit different. But if you've ever been, and none of you're all spiritual giants, but you've never got this resentment when you go to a meeting like week after week after week, and it's like, the chairperson hasn't called me to share in weeks, And then I get a little sensitive, and nobody relates. Cool. The weird hypothetical. But here's the thing. It's like, if I go with that lens of finding somebody to help, doesn't matter if I shared or not. That meeting has become a success. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter if and it doesn't even have to be somebody that's new. Like, who's the person that shared that they are not doing well? can I go up to them and talk to them after, even if they've been around a while and they're hurt and they're struggling, they're, they've got that inventory they haven't done. Can I be helpful to them? Can I find that person who didn't identify as new, who didn't say I'm new, but you can just tell they're uncomfortable to be there and they're sitting or standing by themselves after the meeting. Can I go find them and bring them in and include them and show them where the stuff is? Here's the bathrooms. Here's where the coffee is. Do you want to come sit with me? Can I bring people in? Can I include people? And if that's the orientation that I have when I go to a meeting, it changes the meeting. Now, you don't have to call it this, but I like to call it ninja service, where I do service and try not to get caught, and like I'll give myself a little side quest at the meeting. Like I'll hear that somebody's having a hard time and I'm like, ding, side quest unlocked. Go reach out to that person, like that. Not everything's a game page. Well, I'll give you a gold star if you do it. And actually, one of the things is I have like the cycle stickers, or I have some bookmarks. So at in-person meetings, I have these things that I made that like I'll give to newcomers, where it's like, hey, this kind of explains what we're talking about, and it's a great conversation starter to get us talking. So, and if we're meeting people online, let's just see if we can get their number in the chat, rather than like, hey, this is me. This is my number. If you want, you share yours with me and I'll reach out to you. And we can stay in contact if you'd like. So that I'm just going to throw that out there, because that makes it so much easier, and it changes how we show up. So it says, perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. That's not the case. Oh, actually, sorry, more things. Another place we can find them in 2025 is if you need a sponsee and you raise your hand to share, or you get called to share, you can say, I'm looking for sponsees. I could use a sponsee. Like, nobody says you can't do that. You can do that. Also, if going to a meeting where there's a lot of newcomers and sharing about your experience with the steps and about the spiritual awakening, that can be really helpful. It's like, oh, that person knows how to do that. That's a person to ask for help. So those are some additional suggestions. So it says you can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. Now, we don't have to do that in 2025, but the fellowship we are a part of does. And that's when Lynn put in the chat, H&I is a great opportunity. Absolutely. So the modern equivalent of me as an individual reaching out to hospitals, which I can't do because I feel like there's HIPAA violations. I don't think they'll give me the deets, but reaching out to people that come into contact with alcoholics or drug addicts or whatever fellowship you're a part of, reaching out to those people. And that's often the arm of public information. And so it's worth considering getting in contact with our public information committee for whatever fellowship you're a part of and getting involved. And hospitals and institutions, again, that is a great place to find newcomers to work with. And if they're in an institution, they can't leave, so they're a captive audience. They don't always like it when you make that joke. So just going to throw that out there. So getting involved in hospitals and institutions is another wonderful way to be of service. And it's a powerful experience. And I've done, over the years, I've done a lot of H&I work, more than PI work. I'll cop to that. But I will say PI work a lot. I've done a lot of phone monitoring. And when I say work, I mean service, like being of service to the fellowship. None of this was obviously paid. But just for those that don't know, I want to be really clear. So I've done service in those capacities. And it is a wonderful way to connect with people who come into contact with us. Absolutely. Yeah, prospecting like gold. Yeah, there's gold out there. Absolutely. And that's a beautiful tie-in to in the family afterwards, there's this beautiful metaphor of the gaunt prospector. And it's like suddenly we strike gold, and we got to keep mining this thing and we got to keep giving it away. Absolutely. So, and with the prospector metaphor, if I'm looking for gold, if I'm looking for that newcomer, I've got to be active in it, because I don't know if you're aware, especially my financial situation, there is not gold flowing through this basement. And some of you are like, yes, I'm quite aware. My parents told me money did not grow on trees, and even if it did, I would have to pluck it. So the spiritual juice, the spiritual gold, the spiritual value, I've got to go and seek it and work for it. So you can easily find some by asking a few doctors, priests, ministers, or hospitals. So nowadays, getting involved in hospitals and institutions, getting involved in the Public Information Committee, getting involved with the cooperation with the Professional Community Committee, which is sometimes under Public Information, sometimes separate. So it says, they will be only too glad to assist you. Then it says, don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. And it's one of those like, wait a minute, in 2025, that doesn't seem to be the case. Well, I want to contextualize this part of the book. You see, what had happened was the 18th Amendment. Now, the 18th Amendment made the sale of alcohol illegal in the United States. And then that amendment was repealed, so taken back in 1933, I believe. Yes, teach, not preach. Absolutely, absolutely. And so with the repeal of alcohol, the repeal of the legislation that made the sale of alcohol illegal, yes, absolutely, not holier than thou either. That was still a hot button contested issue. And so what we're talking about is there were a lot of people who were alcohol reformers. So a lot of people who were like pushing politically and protesting, who wanted the sale of alcohol to be illegal. And so that, imagine trying to 12-step where that was a hotly debated topic. And so that's sort of the guidance of what it's saying is like, hey, be aware that there's a lot of like controversy because of the political climate. Now, as what's been put in the chat, so that's the context, but the deeper truth that still remains is, man, nobody likes to be preached to. Nobody likes to be talked down to. Nobody likes to be condescended to. And that I've shared this before. That same friend that would be like, host of friends, and I'd be like, frequent contact with newcomers. I'm touching you. Contact. You're the newcomer. That same friend absolutely did not like being condescended to. And whenever the word condescension or condescending would come up in conversation, I would do this every single time. I'd turn to my friend and be like, condescending, that means talking down to people, just to tease. I wouldn't like actually do that, like be condescending, but like I like to joke about that. I am a difficult human being to deal with is really the takeaway from this big book study. Everyone's like, Saint Terry, we miss him, bring him back. What he must endure. So yeah, that idea that we're meant to show up shoulder to shoulder. Man, if you want to help, let me show you what I've done. Let me help. We're going to work together on this. That's what we find to be helpful. So it says, unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. And again, that prejudice is that context of the difficulty around, condescension, the difficulty around the 18th Amendment. And it says you will be handicapped if you arouse it. So if we create a situation where people are like reactive and defensive and, creating the eye rolls, this sort of thing again, I'm going to be nagged, that doesn't work. It goes on to say ministers and doctors are competent, which it does say some that you have to tell alcoholics that other people are competent. If you've heard of the never underestimate the restorative power of the human ego, like, it'll grow right back. They are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. And that is powerful. Yes, you, all of us. And again, it is our lived experience, because as we're joking around, like, I don't want to be condescended to. Don't talk down to me. Nobody, no human being on earth likes that. No human being appreciates that. But that idea that, like, our experience is useful to others. So when there are doctors, we lie to our doctors. We'd lie to our psychiatrists. Not you guys. You guys would never. But people like me, we would absolutely lie to the professionals in our life, which I think is so funny. I've never had like a paid, like, I always had one that was like through benefits. I've never had a therapist or a counselor that I paid, but we are types of people, not you guys, but we are types of people that would, $200 a session to lie to somebody who's supposed to help us, and this, I learned this. So somebody ratted us out. And who was it? Was it one of you? Someone ratted us out because doctors or psychologists or any sort of professional that comes in contact with us, if they suspect they have a drinking problem, they take the number of drinks that we give them and they triple it. Who told? Who told? Now, if they suspect we have a drug problem, guess what they do? They take the number, the like amount, and divide it by 3, because we're like lying about the amount so that they give us more. Who was telling them? Not cool. But it comes, like, the people that are up, the people that have professions and are important and have degrees, like, man, we tend to lie to them. But there is something incredibly disarming of, I've been there. I've been there the way you've been there. I've gone through what you've gone through. I have experienced what you have experienced. And I found a way out. And if you want that too, I will help you. Like, we'll do this thing together. Man, that is incredibly disarming. And that is how we get to be uniquely useful. But I've got to have all those pieces in place. I have to have my experience with the problem. I've got to have my experience with the solution, the spiritual awakening, and my lived experience with the program of action. Because it does no good if I'm telling you what I need to do or what you need to do if I'm not actually doing it. And so it goes on to say, so cooperate, never criticize. And that can be really helpful. If somebody's living in a treatment center and their treatment center is not 12-step based, it can be really easy to be like, that treatment center doesn't know what they're talking about. Yeah, but the person I'm working with, they have to follow those rules because they need a house to live in. So there is that element of cooperate, never criticize. And this is also important. To be helpful is our only aim. So to be helpful, the whole purpose is to be helpful. Not to fix, not to manage, not to save, not to cure, but to be helpful. That is our only aim. And we see that as a threat, that our job is to help. And here's the thing about helping, is if I'm actually helping and not manipulating and doing things so I feel better about myself, if I'm actually helping, if you don't want help anymore, I stop. You see what I'm saying? Helping is not saving. It's kind of like, actually, I'm not a first responder of any sort, but if somebody's like choking or whatever, and they're like, I don't want medical help, it's like, I will not help, right? And as soon as they are unconscious, then you have to save them because it's implicit consent. It's a little like that in this thing. Everyone here has the ability to say, no, I'm not interested. No, I don't want to do it. No, thank you, which is never that polite. And my job isn't to convince them. My job is simply to be a demonstration of this power and what works. Now, I'm just aware of the time. Instead of going to the next page, I know it's bad. I didn't even get through a page. What I want to do is really quickly, I'll just break this down. What I found is that the chapter, how it works a whole lot like a flow chart. There's a lot of if, then this, if, then this. So I wanted to break down some of what we've already seen. So where do we start? We start up at the start. Do I have a prospect? Do I have somebody to work with? And then, so if the answer is no, Here's what we can do. You can find one by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, hospitals, modern 12-step, HI, PI, attend meetings. But if I have found someone, let's find out. And this is what we're going to cover in the coming weeks. Do they want to quit? If not, my job is not to persuade them. If they do, I have a series of actions that I can take. The first is to find out as much information about them as I possibly can. That information gathering so that I can see how I can best be helpful, right? To see what is their cycle of alcoholism or addiction. What is their cycle looking like? How much time do we have before they relapse to work in the steps? Like, let's get information about, have they been to 12-step before? What did that look like? Have they done rehab? Like, what's been going on? And then we share about our own experiences. And as we do, we then get into describing the nature of the illness, focusing on the obsession and focusing, of course, on the allergy, but more specifically on the obsession of the mind. And that is what makes this thing hopeless. So that's what we're laser beam focusing on for step one. And when, they're sharing their examples and they're starting to get it, we can then talk about what happened to us, which was the spiritual awakening. And in that, we explain, like, hey, that there is a solution. Could you believe that that exists? And that's just laying down the information for step two. Now it goes on, and we're going to see this in the coming weeks, outline the program of action, the 12 steps. So problem solution program of action, or the foundation of the information for step 1, 2, 3. And we explain the course of action that we took to get from that hopelessness to that hope. And if they want to do this work, if yes, amazing, let's get into it with them. If not, that's cool. And so we can see how it follows this flow and this pattern, and it's going to help us each step of the way, and it's going to give us even more specific directions that I couldn't quite fit in a flow chart. But so what the whole point of this that I'm talking about is, a lot of times we are scared to sponsor or nervous to work with others. And I just want to emphasize, the information is all there, and we've had the experience, and none of us are doing it alone. So if you've not had the experience, you're nervous to sponsor. I mean, that's part of why we do these studies, is so that you feel more able to work with others. Like, that's the point. And so you don't have to do it alone. And really what I'll end on is, like, let us help you. Let us help you have the experience that we found, and let us help you have the experience of working with others. So we're almost at the hour. What I will do is I will stop the recording and we can wrap it up, and I'll set it so y'all can unmute, and we'll wrap up with the Serenity Prayer.